Um, but this was a magical season. It was, and I want to make sure that that's not lost on people, and I don't think it is. I think as the days go on from last Sunday, I think it hurts a little bit less. It really hurts a little bit less when you got the news yesterday that Ben Johnson was returning as your offensive coordinator. Outstanding news for Dan Campbell, for these players, for this coaching staff. I had already written Ben Johnson off. I thought he was gone. I thought that was, on to the next guy. Huge loss, but they were going to have to figure it out. We were already having the conversations. Can Jared Goff, can he be this good in another system? Was it just Ben Johnson? Well, we're going to have to wait at least one more year to answer that question, because Ben Johnson's coming back. It's absolutely huge. So while there was massive disappointment against the 49ers, and we are going to get into that here next, some positive news as well. We haven't heard anything about Aaron Glenn. We do know one opening recently closed. Mike McDonald, shout out, man, getting his first head coaching job. Go Blue. I absolutely I'm so happy for him. Aaron Glenn, I think people are kind of mixed on if he left and somehow got a head coaching job. I don't think people would be like, oh my, what are we going to do? You already got people that are somewhat frustrated with him, but look, he's been in the system. He's Dan Campbell's guy, and as of right now, the coaching staff is still completely intact, with the understanding that may change a little bit. But Brant, I want to know your thoughts on, because I don't want to beat around the bush on this. I think the biggest topic that has come out after this game is Dan Campbell. Or Dan Gamble, right? As we saw that literally come to fruition, and we know what it looks like when it doesn't work out. You've got a pocket of Lions fans that are just absolutely beside themselves. Take the points, kick the field goals, and another that's like, look, great season. I can't be mad at Dan, yada, yada, yada. Brant, I want to know what side you stand on, or are you somewhere in the middle?
I'm definitely in the middle, and I hate to be that guy, because Sunday I was so upset. I really was the guy screaming on 4th and 2. Go ahead and take the 3. You keep pace with them, and that's all I could keep thinking in my mind. Dave, was we're middle of the third quarter. The 49ers had just gotten the ball to get out of the half, and they take 5 or 6 minutes off the clock, and they come down and they get stopped for a field goal. The defense does its job. Boom, you get the ball back. You're at their 28. You got a big decision to make. Dan, I really wish that you would have just trotted out Michael Badgley. That was exactly what was going through my mind. And in that moment, I did not think, oh, they just lost the game. But you go from 3 possessions to 1 possession if you do not get this 4th down, basically, because you knew the 49ers were going to strike back eventually. Eventually, they were going to make enough plays to get back in the game. And keeping the 3 possession lead was everything to me, Dave. That's really what I thought. And Dan called it. He called the right play. Ben Johnson called the right play. Josh Reynolds was open. Just didn't make the play. And that sometimes happens. And that's why I think a lot of Lions fans say, hey, it's not like he called up something that just completely didn't work. He called up a play that actually worked. And Jared Goff executed like Jared Goff always executes. And, Josh Reynolds just didn't make the play, and that's the way that it went. And we all saw what happened after that. The one thing I do want to talk about, though, Dave, is I'm the guy that's screaming, make it a 3-possession lead. You have to keep pace with them. That's exactly what you need to do. I was also the guy that was telling him, you've got to go when you're down 27-24. I like that call better. I'm more okay with the second 4th down call later in the game. I didn't think you needed to tie the game there. I think you needed to make the statement and go for it. And so I'm on the fence, Dave. Like, the one I would have kicked, the second one I would have I would have went for it just like he did. I would have never called a run on 3rd down at the end of the game like he did. I thought that was a terrible call. Dan even mentioned it a little bit. That one. The problem I had with Dan's presser after the game is he said he's got no regrets. And that's where I take issue with Dan Campbell. I've got a major issue with him coming out and saying he's got no regrets. No matter what you do in life, Dave, I think that you can take it away, and it's okay to say, I haven't watched the film yet. I'm going to get back with you. I need to examine all of my calls and just make a real evaluation. And instead of just coming out and saying, I've got no regrets, I would do it again 100 out of 100 times. Nah, that doesn't work for me, because that means you're not willing to change. You're not willing to be open to ideas. You're not willing to look at different analytics and think, maybe the analytics say one thing, but the temperature of the room says, I need to do this differently. I need to keep pace here. This burned me in the past. I'm not going to let it burn me again. And it's okay to have humility. It's okay to be like, hey, maybe I should go back and think about that one again. I've got a major problem with him coming out. And I know it's heat of the moment, but I don't think he should have said what he said after the game about, I've got no regrets on the game. Well, Dan, you just blew a 17-point lead. I sure hope you got some regrets.
I don't think he has regrets, because
that's all I really had for you, Dave.
In the moment of these games, you've seen it not even all year. You've seen it the last 3 years. That's what he does. We have said for multiple years now, it just matters more this year because you're in the playoffs and one game away from the Super Bowl. Is
that an issue for you, though? Is that an issue for you?
I guess I haven't really thought about him
regrets?
saying he has no regrets, because I heard him say he didn't say I have a regret, but he did regret something, and that was the play that you mentioned. That was my biggest frustration, was the run and then the timeout being burned, because at that point, I looked over and told my wife, like, the game's over. You're not getting an onside kick, so the game's over at that point. I think he did regret that. I think Dan genuinely means what he says when he says, I don't regret those calls, because, look, you laid it out perfectly, Brant, in terms, like, I'm with you. So I guess I should start with this, okay, because I know I'm going to get criticized by people for what I'm about to say. I would have taken the points. I was with you in the terms of, I'm watching the game, like, kick the field goal. Just kick the field goal. Dan didn't kick the field goal. Was I surprised that he didn't? No, because that's just who Dan is. I'm not saying that it was the right decision. Brant, clearly it was the wrong decision because it didn't work. However, am I going to fault the guy for dialing that up, for drawing it up, for Josh Reynolds to drop that ball there? Like, no, I'm not. I'm sure there's, however you want to define regret. Does Dan wish that it would have went a different way? Absolutely. But I don't think he does regret that. I think he'd do it all over again. And that scares some people. And I understand that. However, and I know that you hate to hear this, Brant, that is what has helped get the Lions to where they're at. It's the identity of this football team. It's why the players love Dan Campbell. I'm not saying they love every single decision he makes, but he does it with conviction. He trusts his players, and there are some coaches that say it and others who live and breathe it. Dan lives and breathes it. It's how he has command of this locker room. It's why he can cry in front of these guys and just, you could hear a pin drop in the room. They respect Dan. I'm not making excuses for him. I think he made the wrong call. I do. Especially, everybody could say hindsight's 2020. I felt it in the moment. However, I will take Dan Campbell 100 times out of 100 than like the majority of the NFL coaches. I just will. You've got a gem in Dan Campbell, and his aggressiveness, his just who he is to the core. I don't want to change that. Now, to your point, Brent, because I'm going to meet you in the middle a little bit. Do I hope he grows over the years in terms of that decision making? Absolutely. But am I going to kill the guy for saying he has no regrets on that? No, because I genuinely don't think that he does. I think that the more he gets into these games, into just more games as a head coach, yeah, sure. I hope he evolves, but I hope he also stays true to who he is, man. Look, listen to every commentator in any Lions game this year. They all have to talk about it. Well, this is Dan Campbell. He's done this more than any coach in the league, and blah, blah, blah. Like, people know it, but it's all about execution, and you may know it. You may know he's going to gamble on a 4th and 5, or you're like, dude, like, punt it or kick the field goal or whatever. Stop it then, and you know what? Josh Reynolds dropped the ball. I know that's one of two that I'm talking about, but Sometimes it happens. Sometimes the ball falls that way. Look, it was the perfect storm. It was those decisions followed up by Vildor getting smoked in the face with the football, weird bounce. Ayuk catches it, thought he scored a touchdown, whatever. They marched it in right after with Christian McCaffrey, followed up by a Jahmyr Gibbs fumble, which is not like him. I mean, it was just once it started to snowball, it snowballed, and there was no coming back from that. Now, they did have a chance right up till that very end of that game, and that was my frustration. Was I did feel like I want to say Dan choked in the big moment because that's not what it was. But that call to run the football, that's like some people say that's a bold call. I think that was a dumb call. I just call it that. Like, because if you don't get that, you are either. I mean, first of all, burning that timeout, even though they didn't get it, just burning that timeout in that moment was like, oh, like that's where Dan needs to grow right there. Of like, just the in the moment, like making the decision. And I know that ties in with the other one. I think those were more calculated. I think Dan knew all along, right? In those other moments, like, oh no, we're going for it. I think he stuttered a little bit there at the end of that game, and it cost them. And so I think that's why, although he won't use the word regret, I think that's the play he's talking about. And man, I don't want Dan Campbell to change. I don't think anybody does, but I understand your point of you want to hear, I wouldn't even call it regret. You want to hear some honest reflection. Is that fair?
I do. I absolutely do. And I think Dan Campbell's the type of guy. Any profession you're in, like any field, it doesn't matter if you're CEO of whatever. You need to sit down and think like, this is what I want. This is what I want to have happen. Is I want adults to get into a room and say, listen, in the situations that we had in this playoff game, we need to go over. It needs to be talked about and it needs to be assessed. It can't just be Dan getting up from the table and saying, nope, this is my way or the highway, and I don't even want to discuss it. I think it would be healthy for everybody, whether it be the front office or whatever, whoever Dan's closest confidants are, to get with him and just say, all right, Dan, let's bounce some ideas here. Like, whatever. And Dave, you touched on the timeout, after I did, but I think that that's one where, did Dan have an analytic in his back pocket that said, hey, if I get to third and short here, this seems to work every single time. I have to run the ball. Well, Dan, time and score. Let's go over that real quick. And I know the clock's running. I understand that, but you've got to know when there's just a minute and 10 seconds left, I can't run the ball. Like the analytic goes out the window because it doesn't apply here because we're under 2 minutes. Like that needs to be a staple for him and Ben and whoever's in the offensive playroom. Like that has got to be a conversation. So I hope that Dan is going to be open to that. And Dave, you already said I'm not going to kill the guy either. Like I do think it's lazy when people say this is the reason we're here. Like, no, there was a lot of hard work that went into, you know what I mean? It's just like the overarching theme of like, no, we got to have Dan be aggressive because that's how we got here. No, chill, man. Like it was a part of how you got here because Dan late in games, it seemed like it worked every single time this year. I would hate to see it go the other way and all of a sudden it doesn't work every single time next year. And then you kind of have people in the middle. This was a magical year. That's just the bottom line of it. Things broke right for the Lions and they had a magical year. People talking about they're going to be disappointed if they're not in the NFC Championship game next year. This is the NFL, man. Worry about week 1. Don't be worrying about the NFC Championship, the Super Bowl. Like, don't set your expectations at NFC Championship levels. Worry about winning the division again. Worry about the up-and-coming Packers. Worry about the Bears. And I know the players' mindset will be week to week to week. But I also think as fans, you kind of have to have that week-to-week mentality. Like, I hate when people just jump to that in the NFL. Yep, NFC Championship or bust, or I'm throwing away my Lions gear. Chill, man. There's a whole offseason to get through. You got free agency. You have the draft. Like, let this marinate. Let Dan go back to the lab. Let let Brad Holmes cook in the draft and let him work his
Yeah.
salary
Look,
cap
I don't
numbers.
think if
Enjoy the
if
offseason.
Lions
That's a
fans
damn
that
good
have held
football
on
team.
to their Lions gear for the last like 60 years didn't burn it then, nobody's burning it now after this awesome season. And yeah, I think that kind of puts a bow on this because you're right, Brant. Winning in this league is hard. I said it last episode before they played the 49ers. The Lions will have a better football team top to bottom next year than the team that we just watched that we all know and love right now and not get it done. Doesn't mean they're going to make the NFC Championship. Doesn't mean they're going to be 30 minutes away from a Super Bowl. Like, there's a lot that has to go right for you, unless you are Tom Brady and the Patriots, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Like, there are exceptions to every rule, but look at the Buffalo Bills. Okay, they got good football team, yeah, but like every year it's like they get to the same spot and just can't get it done. And so I'm not setting up people for disappointment or to let expectations down. Dan Campbell said it best. Like, I loved what he said. Some people got it twisted saying that, look, we may never get back here. That he's not saying they're not going to, okay? But I loved what he said. This is going to be twice as hard. We're going to have to put in twice as much work to get back here. People got our number now, right? Like, it's not the Cinderella story of, oh my gosh, the Lions, the first time in 30 years. And nope, all that's out the window. The goalposts have moved, right? It's moved for the fan base. It's moved for other teams. The Packers, the Bears, the Vikings, they want your head right now, right? Worry. I love what you said, Brant. Worry about week one. Worry about winning the division. Take it week by week. Do you do those things with this formula and this coaching staff that appears to be pretty well intact? I think it's going to lend itself to another run in the playoffs. I do. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but this is a very, very good football team in a very, very special season, and that is certainly not lost on me. Brant, your final thoughts here before we get out of it.
Yeah, I do want to touch on what Dan said about that too, because I think that's important because you've got to understand, and if you've just started paying attention to the Lions, then maybe you wouldn't understand this. Dan is an NFL guy. Dan's been in the league forever. He played in the league. He's coached in the league. He's coached tight ends. Like, he's played as a tight end. Dan knows how hard it is to get where they just got to. And him having that understanding, I think, is so crucial to be able to tell these guys, look, man, I've been in this thing for 20 years. That really was special. And if you want to get back, you're gonna have to, like he said, work twice as hard. Because you know what? He's been in locker rooms where guys probably haven't worked as hard the next year. Probably thought, hey, we got the dudes to get this done. Nah, that other team over there, they're hungrier. They're hungrier than you. And trying to keep that going. That's why I think he's the perfect guy for this city. He's the perfect guy for this franchise. And don't get it twisted. Just because I think Dan's got to improve on some stuff, he's still the perfect guy for this job. And I absolutely
Build the
love Dan
statue.
Campbell.
I'm ready for it. Yeah,
Detroit's not going to
I'm
happen.